Humanianity, a new religious call. Humanianity, religion for us all. Humanity, now we all can see. Humanity, how much better we can be.
Hi, I'm Bill Van Fleet, and this is Humanianity Conversation number 101, recorded on February 3rd, 2021. It is the seventh recorded conversation with David Whalen, an advocate for objectivism. Much of our discussion revolved around the comparison of our two belief systems with regard to whether rationality can be considered a part of human nature, including the question of the meaning of rationality. Hi, Dave.
Hey, Bill.
So, have you thought about tonight's discussion? Uh, Things that you wanted to specifically cover?
Yeah, I think so far, we've covered pretty much, metaphysics and epistemology. Um, and I think we're kind of heading now. We touched on it at the end last time about how our understanding of humanity and our situation and what we believe that is best, according to our nature as humans. Uh, Now, what's the best way for man to thrive? What would be the best, uh, type of government or the best way that humans should live together? I think maybe we can get into forms of government, um, different ways of getting along, and also maybe we can start maybe talking about the ethics that would be involved with humans living together in a society that would be optimal for our species.
Okay. Excuse me. I'm not sure that we have a good foundation of understanding between the belief systems and so forth. And uh, I, I was immediately alerted when you talked about human nature. And I wonder if before getting further up in the tree, so to speak, we could take a look at that term, human nature, and uh, because I believe that, um, excuse me, I believe that objectivists um, base uh, their more advanced beliefs on uh, an understanding of what human nature is, and I'm not sure that um, that I could agree with their position about that. So uh, could we take a look at what is human nature then, and we can then move up the tree, so to speak, uh, later.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good idea. Well, with objectivism, um, they they hold more to human nature as humans have certain capacities that they're born with. Um, uh, I would not say any innate ideas beforehand, but merely the fact that humans were born with certain um, capacities to do things, which have to be developed over time. Like infant relies more on sense perception in their early moments and times, and as they grow, their consciousness develops. They start to rationalize, use reason, and then that grows, and they learn, from the parents or school or their culture about things. Um, and so, I think the biggest important one of the biggest things that objectivism really places in human nature is that humans are not only have the capacity to be rational, but that they have the ability and are uh, volitional creatures that can make choices, and they have then the power to will. They have the power of liberty.
Well, before you go too far, so humans can make choices.
Mhm.
Um, I think we've talked some about that before, but so do do dogs make choices?
I've I'll tell you what I initially believe on that. I have not studied animal species, and I don't know a lot about that. But being a dog owner myself and having dogs all my life, um, I believe that dogs have a certain uh, what you might call a certain level of rationality, and so do other more the higher animals do, where I believe they can make choices based upon survival or even affection, um, to play, to have fun. Um, and so I believe that they do that, and it's not just instinct. I believe that,
Okay.
yeah. So I believe instinct is more with has to do with more sense perception, immediate perceptions, and even humans have that,
See, I
to
think that
some level.
we have uh, a completely different language um, and kind of basic concepts. um, you said that dogs could be rational to some extent. Did I understand correctly?
Yes,
Okay. So then I need to know what you mean by rational.
I would say when I use rational, um, I use the word that they have a consciousness, so they're aware, they're awake of their surroundings, and like with humans, we can have an understanding, we have thoughts, we have ideas, and these thoughts and ideas, uh, as we are aware of things, then we can make we can start to rationalize things by uh, you know I like to use the word understanding, so we can think, and then we can start to um, I like rational because I understand what that definition means. I know what that word means, but try to explain it, meaning like uh, we can um, we can make a good decision, or a what we believe is a good decision based upon circumstances, or um, um, what we know that we can do, or even if we can't do it, we can think we can do it. Um, so we can make these choices based upon those things right there. So
Okay. Um, Well, we have, as I say, an entirely different language, um, and um, and it is hard for me to follow you. Um, I have, in my mind, of course, a system of ideas, beliefs, propositions, and so on that I understand because of course, I have thought a lot about them. There's been a lot of repetition, and there's internal consistency and so on. What I'm worried about is in our discussions, um, it would be easy for us to just uh, give our specific opinions in our own terminology, the other person not really understanding, and the other person doing the same. And so it's just um, a conversation of two people with a different language talking past each other. And so I'm wondering if um, it would help to try to become a little more specific about some of these things, um, to improve the depth of the discussion, because it happens all the time that people state what their beliefs are to the other person, and the other person says, "Well, that's interesting, and I believe such and such." Yeah, well, that's interesting, and there's no movement. There's no movement in the direction of agreement uh, based upon mutual um, correct understanding of each other. Um, the One of the things that worries me about objectivism is, um, indeed, they cut humans off in a sense from other animals, and it is sounding to me from your presentation like they do not really understand what has happened with us humans, and how they how we have indeed developed the capability that you're talking about, capability for rationality and so on. So I would like to uh, review again an alternative. Now, by the way, I wanted to ask, have you read any more in the Mind Body Problem book?
No, I haven't had a chance to. With my schedule right now, I'm not able to. So
Yeah, okay. Um, I understand. Um, because that is involved very much in what you were talking about. And, but at any rate, so the uh, I understand that you uh, really believe in science, in the strong effort to have beliefs as accurate as possible. And science includes the science of life on the planet, including animal life and so forth. And scientists have come up with uh, the understanding that we are hominids, very closely related to chimpanzees and bonobos and orangutans and so forth. Uh, and so hominids uh, do good things and bad things, using good and bad in using the value system that I think you and I would agree with. So they fight and kill each other uh, to different degrees depending upon the species, and they have uh, attachment and fondness for each other, and engage in mutual grooming and assistance and things of that sort. So we humans started off uh, essentially with very little difference between how we behaved and how the other species behaved. And I'm oversimplifying because, of course, there were other human species, and the pathway to humans as exist today is very complex, but we don't need to understand any of that. So, and I don't have good knowledge of it. Okay, so if we go back, not a few thousand years, but much more than that, uh, where we were very, very similar to um, other hominids. We see ourselves as engaging in the same behaviors and so on. And but there is something that has made us humans uh, drastically different in certain ways from other species. Now, do you know what I'm referring to?
Well, I can tell you what I think it is. From
Okay.
what I've learned, I think with the human species, one of the biggest things that we can do that's different from uh, even the highest levels of animal species, different from us, is the ability to do abstraction, to create ideas in our mind, to picture things, and then attempt to create it, to make it a reality. Um, uh,
Okay. Now, so that is definitely different from what my answer would be.
okay.
And my answer would be that there is one thing that humans developed that resulted in them becoming drastically different from all other species. And that was the development of the essentially unlimited ability to use symbols and the rules of syntax. Symbols, in other words, words, um, um, could be to some extent sign language, but basically words, and of course it progressed to using other kinds of symbols and their syntax, like in mathematics and so on. But that's way down the road. But so uh, this ability to use symbolic language, as far as I can figure, has brought about two major changes in how we actually are. And that is that by virtue of that capability, we can have much more intensive empathy, because I can tell you, as an example I use, I can tell you what I was thinking about yesterday doing tomorrow, and how I feel about it, and what I think you may be thinking about how I feel about it. And so uh, we can get to know each other because each of us can uh, present to the other what it's like to be inside, what we are experiencing. We can't tell all that much by just looking at each other. Uh, and have some understanding of what the person is feeling or thinking, for that matter. But thinking is a more advanced kind of thing, depending upon what one means by thinking. We can get to that. But anyway, so the first thing is much more intensive empathy. So we're much more able um, to identify with each other, so to speak, to feel for each other, and so on. The second thing is a much greater ability to instruct, to tell somebody how to do something. You learn how to do something and you can tell the other person in words, and then they know how to do it. You can tell them how to get to some place that they have never been, um, by just your words, and so on. And so that started the process of uh, humans together making things more and more. So it made us much more able uh, to utilize tools and construct tools for various purposes, and to retain that knowledge, pass it along. So now, that does not mean that we are any different from the chimpanzees and bonobos and so on in all other respects. So, with our words, we now are able to do things that um, the other species do in more primitive ways. We can fight with our words. We can make love with our words. So that means that our behavior has become much, much more complex. Um, and so that is the basic difference between uh, us humans and other animals. Now, does that sound like a reasonable idea, or does it seem to be a little bit off track, off base?
No, I agree that that has been developed by humans. I would say, from my point of view, that uh, simple, immediate perceptions of humans, and then also abstract ideas in our minds, those come initially, and then humans, then in their cultures, have developed symbols, or I would say archetypes, and languages which represents those perceptions and abstract ideas. Now that can mean there could be mistakes. We could have a word.
But
Uh,
where is that different from what I said? Because I'm not sure that I understood what you said. Where is it different
well,
from?
I don't think it's different. I think well, first it comes into the human's mind. Humans first put these things in their minds, and then created languages and symbols to represent those things, to give it a meaning so that we can understand, we can communicate to one another, like you said. Um, but uh,
So you
they
believe
would.
that humans made conscious choice? I think I'm going to start using language. I need a symbol for such and such. We don't really believe that, right? This is a slowly evolving natural process that occurs just in the day-to-day living of humans. It's um, see, I think what happens uh, as as I listen to you, it's like um, you're no longer talking about 100,000 years ago. You're talking about today, and I'm saying that because there's a lot more to be said about us having become different. But I see us as thinking of humans um, in a different way, in that you're just kind of starting with humans the way they currently are.
Mm.
Uh, and I'm starting with humans when humans started. And that was a very long time ago. Oh, another thing, let me um, clarify. This development of symbolic language was not something that happened one day, of course. So what happened, it started very, very slowly, undetectably, not particularly different perhaps from what other species were doing, but because of maybe the enhanced frontal cortex that we humans have, and maybe that's due to the cooking of food. I don't know. I've heard that, um, expressed. Uh, but at any rate, that change started speeding up at some point and finally really took off. And so that it is essentially almost unlimited. It's like a new emergent, so to speak. So, and of course, one of the things that helped that along was writing, and then the press and stuff like that. But long before that, we were having complex discussions with each other. So, um, so that's an exponential change, but it doesn't explain um, a lot of why we are the way we are now compared to how we were 100,000 years ago or so. Um, and so the next thing that comes, that the next change that occurs, um, I refer to as rationality. And see, from your standpoint, oh well, it's just human nature that we're rational. And I say no. Uh, that rationality is a um, is an accomplishment that was based upon uh, the uh, enormous capability of symbolic language. And what it was, we got the idea that, well, in the first place, with our language, we put our beliefs in those languages. I believe that there's somebody around the corner. I believe that it's going to rain. Uh, I believe that this is good to eat, and so on. Okay. Uh, what we accomplished at a certain point, uh, relatively recently in our development, was the ability to use the rules of logic. And all that means is that we can uh, take a look at a set of um, sentences or propositions and see whether they are internally consistent. In other words, there's the concept of contradiction and non-contradiction. And so we developed the rules of logic, and that enabled us to have our things like mathematics and so on. And we began to be able to say, well, how can you say you believe that when you say you believe such and such? Aren't they contradictory? And so on. So that began to occur. And then after that was something further, namely the rules of evidence. And those are the rules that science uses ultimately to set up valid experiments so that we're not fooled by our observations, so that we are able to uh, uh, get superstitious interpretations out of the picture to a great extent. So uh, that meant that we could indicate what would increase or decrease the probability of something being so, and so on. And so that gave us our science and technology, which started off very slowly, but at some point began accelerating. And now everybody, I think, says it's an exponential change. Our technology, especially internet technology and computers and all of that. Um, so uh, that capability for rationality does not manifest itself at birth or at the first year of life or the second year of life or whatever. Uh, it usually is going to depend to a great extent on education and things of that sort, but not necessarily formal education. But we learn from each other. Uh, the child says such and such, and the parent says, well, that can't be right because you just said so and so. Or, I know that's the way it seems to you, but it's just coincidence, and so on. So we begin teaching rationality. And so rationality is a learned procedure. It is not built into us. The capability for uh, the symbolic language usage is built into us, the capability. But if we didn't have social interaction and everything, we probably wouldn't develop language. Uh, so, um, so we're talking about psychosocial changes occurring on top of this thing that has made us more capable in one particular area. Um, but as far as rationality being a part of our human nature, I would say that it's very evident. It seems to me very evident that in general we humans are not rational. Uh, it's an acquired skill, a psychosocially learned skill, and so that's where I deviate some from what I hear you saying. Is there any part of my scenario that does not seem right?
I would say this, and that in my worldview, humans have a capacity built in for rationality that has to develop, but it's not automatic. So, um, um, the capacity does not necessarily mean you already automatically have rationality. It means you have the ability as a human to learn how to be rational and make rational choices and use reason. Um, so, so it can be taught. If we didn't have the capacity, for example, if we were just a parrot, for example, um, I'm not exactly sure how much capacity for rationality a parrot has, but parrots just copy whatever someone else says, but they really don't know what they're talking about. Um, that's not how humans are. Humans, we have this ability, and I don't know how we got it. That part I don't know. And I am talking about how I view humans in more modern times. But even if you go back to, you know,
Excuse me,
yeah,
this capacity,
yeah.
are you still talking about the capacity for symbolic language, or are you talking about this really advanced sort of thing that is making its appearance, namely rationality?
I would say, well, as far as now, I don't know how humans were 100,000 years ago. That I have to admit, that part of science I don't have any research knowledge at all. Um, I do know that um, if you go back to the Assyrians or the Egyptians and the Greeks, at least 500, 800 years, even 1,000 years BC, even amongst the Jews, there was written languages, there were symbols, there was philosophies already, mythologies were created that were archetypes about how they believed about things of the world. So it seems at least 3,000 years ago, humans had already developed rationality that is very similar to what we have today.
Golly,
Beyond that, as far as any evidence, I don't know. Um,
to say that they had rationality back then, like we have today, with modern science and all the disciplines learning internally consistent belief systems and using the rules of evidence. That's quite striking. Um, it's not as if I can't agree with that. I can't agree that ancient Egyptians had the degree of capacity for rational thinking that we have today. Now, they may indeed have had a fair amount of that, but they were very limited in the information that they had acquired so far about how the world works and so on. But we know that they actually were able to do things that were quite striking. So they did have accurate beliefs about some things. So I would say, yeah, we're seeing some evidence of rationality then. But uh, I think to just say, well, I don't know what humans were like, 100,000 years ago, so I'm going to make the assumption that, well, humans are uh, uh, just different from uh, other species, sort of in a binary way. We have it, they don't, or something. And you yourself were talking about dogs having rationality, which I can't agree with. I don't believe that dogs have rationality. They don't have language. They can't um, formulate internally consistent sets of propositions. So, so at any rate, this continues to be a significant difference in our orientations. And what I was hoping was that you either could clarify for me where I was going wrong, or that you could acknowledge that, well, it seemed to make sense,
yeah.
and try to base your subsequent beliefs on that.
Well, to be honest with you, I'm not at the point where I could tell you that you're wrong. I could say that from what I've learned and understand, it's different. But um, my my understanding and learning about humanity goes back only to the human species' own recorded history of how man is, and not beyond that. So that's why I can't say that I don't know enough yet to say that you're wrong. I can only tell you that it's new information for me, things I haven't thought about. Um, but that more of what I learned about human nature is more of what we know about how man is within the last 2,500 years. Uh, that kind of study by evidences that we have of our species. There's really not much before 3,000, 3,000 years ago that we have any really recorded history or understanding of how humans what they did. We have so um,
Well, we're
so
pretty sure that they uh, told stories, past stories along with to each other.
yes, yeah. Oral tradition was very big in ancient man, even amongst the Native American Indians. Native American Indians hardly recorded anything, but they passed on their stories all the way down to there's tribes that still hold the stories that were taught possibly 2,000, 3,000 years ago in North America. They just continue it on, and that's how they hold on to those things.
And
Um,
see, that's only possible with symbolic language. That's the operation of symbolic language. You can pass information to somebody else, and that person can pass information to somebody else. So we're talking about the retention and sharing of information uh, to a much greater extent than any other species can do.
right, and with the ability to have symbolic language, humans can build upon previous knowledge. First, we can judge whether that previous knowledge was right or wrong, which is something that's unique to us. But then we can also build upon previous knowledge quicker. For example,
Why is it unique to us?
well, if you look at this, if chimpanzees today probably still live, I don't know a whole bunch about chimpanzees or that gorillas or anything like that, but the way that they form their, I don't know what you call it, a clan or tribe or whatever they form. You have a male who's dominant and he has females and so forth, and you raise their young. Um, that really probably hasn't changed for millions of years for them. It's remained the same on this earth, probably since they began. Um, where with humans, we're able to discover things in the universe and in our earth, with mathematics and science and physics and the medical sciences and so forth, like this, and astronomy. Uh, and we also have a curiosity for those things too, where chimpanzees look more just to more probably day-to-day survival, more than thinking about the stars or discovering, what is that object that orbits us? What is that? And can we go there one day? Um, we're human species. We've evolved to think about those things, want to discover those things. So, for example, you take Isaac Newton. He made tremendous advancements in physics and calculus and the discovery with gravity that NASA uses today. It's all been proven correct. Even Einstein built upon Newton's discoveries. Um, but what advances us is that we could take Newton's discoveries, all the work he did. We don't have to redo it. We can take that and then look at his proofs to make sure that it was right. And then the sciences can advance upon that and even go farther. So that's what Einstein did, and so forth. So um, there's just something about us humans. I don't know how it happened or why, but it we have those abilities. Um,
Yeah, language and the rules of logic and the rules of evidence.
yes, 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 and then there are ideas that come into our mind. Otherwise we wouldn't want. That's how people wanted to do things, to discover things, to understand things, to think about things, reflection, introspection, um, all these things of our minds. And even the dark side of humanity comes from our minds. Our Carl Jung would call it our shadow, that humans have this shadow in their subconsciousness that is not a good thing, but needs to be controlled, because if that shadow comes out and dominates the human can do some really bad stuff. And we know that from our own history. You just, even recent history, and every day you read the papers, you see humans doing some bad stuff. Um,
And
so I,
what is the basic explanation for it?
for why we do things bad,
Uh-huh.
it's just something in, it's just part of uh, our nature. But it could, but the nature that we have is influenced because we have a consciousness and a subconsciousness, that these things can be affected by culture, upbringing, certain events that happened, uh, um, that can cause us to um, have a dark side. So, for example, people have different degrees of it then, because if they're brought up with good parenting, good culture, they may have their shadow, like Carl Jung would say, wouldn't be that big, and their ego is now developed and strong enough to control it and not allow it to take control. But let's say you take um, someone who's had some bad things in their childhood growing up with their parents that was bad, um, other certain circumstances, and their ego is never really developed, and they have no control, and the shadows take over. They can live in a pretty dark world and think about some pretty bad things and do things to carry out their thoughts. Um,
So we're introducing new terms
hmm,
that are specialized terms like ego and subconscious and things of that sort. I think that um, that's like one branch that of the tree that one can go out, but there are other branches and so on.
hmm,
And what I think you're beginning to refer to, to a great extent, is ethics. What I refer to as ethics. And see, remember, for me, uh, we're born sort of as chimp-like creatures, and we have built into us all the tendencies that chimpanzees and other animals have. They're built into us, and so we manifest them. We start manifesting them as soon as we are able to. As soon as we are able to do things as a small child and so on. And so a lot of those things uh, have to be, quote, controlled, meaning that a change has to be made in that child such that the child inhibits and no longer engages in some of those behaviors. Uh, now, uh, I see that as no different than chimpanzees, and except that um, for us humans, there is a much greater uh, need to control ourselves, um, and much greater trouble that we can get into than chimpanzees, because their behavior kind of fits in with the natural world. So um, so now the scientific term that I think most people have heard of is positive and negative reinforcement. And so we know that uh, given an animal, if it does something and then there is seems to be a resulting bad feeling, uh, then the animal is less inclined to do it again. And if there's a resulting good feeling, the animal is more likely to engage in it again. And so, um, what the members of the culture, initially just mother or parents, and maybe family, but ultimately the rest of the social world that the individual comes into contact with, um, continue that process of positively and negatively rewarding um, uh, or reinforcing certain behaviors. And that process is learning what one should do. Uh, and what we should and should not do, that's what is referred to by ethics or morals. Now, some people make a distinction between the two. I do not. Many people do not. So, so therefore, we have a primitive chimp-like organism that has popped into the world and immediately starts learning, oh, better not do this, or hey, that was great, I want to do that some more. And so that is the beginning of the development of the ethical system that and it varies considerably according to culture, especially as uh, people grow up. Uh, there are cultures that are rather drastically different from one another. Does any of
So,
that sound not right?
well, I would say this. I do agree that cultures are different. We know that for a fact. Cultures, you know, how we are in America versus, you go to Borneo and, these people are still, headhunters and cannibals, their culture is totally different. It's more tribal in a more primitive sense, because modern people have become tribal too. But I think what because I believe in more of a humans coming to rule the blank slate, but with capacities and attributes that make us what we are. Um, we're not born with any innate ideas. I know some people do believe that. I know religious people believe, people believe in God, believe that we're born with innate natures ahead of time and ideas ahead of time, and ethics already built into us. I'm not sure if that's true because different cultures have different ethics. Some are similar, but there might be different degrees of that ethic. But also that we speak different languages. Um, we have different things that are that we consider valuable to us or would be values that other cultures would think otherwise. And so, to me, if humans were born with innate ideas ahead of time or innate morality or ethics, then all humans universally would be the same with those things. There'd be no differences. We'd
So
speak to.
we're in agreement that that we are molded by our cultures, that we have built into us. I assume you agree with me that we have built into us the tendency to fight and uh, to engage in mutual grooming and various other kinds of things that is true of hominids, um, tribalism, and so on. Uh, but that it is our cultures that shape that by inhibiting some aspects and enhancing other aspects.
Mhm. Yes, and you see that even in modern times. Nazi Germany is a classic example of that. Adolf Hitler and the Nazis were able to mold a culture amongst the German people to get their support to do things that we now know, we saw that were what we would consider evil and destructive to humanity. Um, but their culture, they developed a culture for that to do those things. And in
Well,
America, yeah.
I think that there's another way of looking at it too. That that their culture was already that way, and Hitler represented uh, a large portion of the population of Germans and so on. There's some similarity between that and what's been happening these days, I think. That it's the culture that is welcoming of and encouraging to individuals who have those sorts of beliefs and then also uh, offer uh, to be a leader and behave in certain ways that cause other people to look at that individual as a potential leader.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that makes sense. That I agree with that. That is exactly right. Because I think that when, for example, so when the Nazis came to power, they were trying to get their prison camp guards and officers to run the prison camps. And a lot of the men that became the prison camp guards were really nobodies before Nazism took over. And a lot of them were actually losers or military rejects and stuff like this. But they had a really bad dark side to them that was restrained beforehand because the government had laws in place where you couldn't do these things. So it restrained that dark side of them. But then when their culture had made things legal that were evil to do, these men thrived and because now they could fulfill their dark sides in reality legally. And so yeah, that is dangerous things that we are capable of doing. And so my my worldview holds to a what we would call an unconstrained idea of mankind, that man needs to become more rational and less barbaric and more into proving and discovering things. So So, for example, there may be maxims or axioms in the world that have been established, but and if they've been proven and today can still be proven, then okay, we can hold to those to advance our knowledge. But maxims and axioms by themselves um, are nothing without proof. They need proof. So, um, I believe that as our rationality grows and we have more validation from the sciences and mathematics, uh, we can then discard the stuff that we now know that's not good and keep the stuff that's good and keep building on it. And that over time, humanity becomes more rational and rational through um, this thing where we can actually hopefully come to a time where we don't see the need to uh, kill each other over what a certain religious book says about this or that, or certain ideologies that we think is right better than another ideology, and so forth like this. Um, and I think so. For me, man has the capacity to go either way. We can either improve, become more rational, or we can go backwards and go back into the dark ages and start fighting over superstitious things.
Yeah, well, I pretty much agree with that. I might use slightly different wordage, but uh, yes, I think that rationality is something that has to be taught and learned, or uh, the um, the valuing the valuing of study and the valuing of consideration of alternative ideas from one's own is something that has to be learned from the culture. What we're,
Yeah.
what we're dealing with also is we're behaving like chimpanzees, only in highly sophisticated ways with our words and so on. So, chimpanzees are tribalistic, and so are humans. So we have this sensitivity to difference and a tendency to form groups and to be protective of and to value those groups, and then to have diminished empathy for and concern about those outside the group, and even a tendency to attack and eliminate the groups. So,
Yes, yes, and that is a terrible side of humanity. Like for example, we go back to Nazi Germany again. They got rid of anybody, like Jews or Slavs or anybody that either other Germans that were in disagreement with the Nazi regime. That's why they did the book burning, because they didn't want anyone to learn anything that would get them to second guess what the Nazis were doing.
yeah,
Um,
and what I was going to add one final thing, and you're talking about it already, and that is um, we humans um, can base our tribalism upon what we say and what we say we believe, and evidence as to whether we believe what we're saying and so on. And so there's quite a tendency for us humans to divide up into groups based upon beliefs. And so, indeed, that's what you're referring to. We tend to uh, be uh, to honor uh, and be loyal to a particular belief system. And so that makes it hard, of course, to consider alternative options of belief.
Well, and I think what that requires of humans is to discuss these differences, but to be able to live with one another, um, with these differences. I think that is vitally important. I think until humanity can come to agree upon that and do that, um, then I think that man can advance and work out differences and then make corrections to themselves. Um, so for example, um, if I was to take a Protestant Christian friend that I have, and he ardently believes that the Bible, as we know it today, is the Word of God. Okay, and I would say no. I think that's just a man-made book that was written to try to figure out life and stuff, the Jews and so forth. Um, and it's really not God. God shows us, if there was a God, he would show us things through nature, the universe, and so forth. Uh, we would disagree about that. And I think it would be good for both of us to talk about that, why we why we believe that way, and have proofs, bring up our proofs about that, to discuss that, and possibly we'll both learn and make adjustments. Um, but in the meantime, to be able to live with one another and to um, love and care and do good to one another despite those differences. Because as we are right now, humans, as you know, we have a lot of different beliefs, we have a lot of different influences, a lot of different things that cause us to have different beliefs, to different, and even to different degrees, even with morality and ethics. Um, so so I think step one is that as human species, we have to learn to live together with our differences, to be able to civilly discuss these differences, and to learn and then to work things out. And then I think right there requires humility, which is a hard thing for humans to do. But humility would be step one. When I was in college, I remember my philosophy teacher used to say all the time, um, everything I tell you and teach you in class, I want you to question. Just don't take it for granted that I'm telling you the truth. And I thought that was really good. He wanted us to question him.
Mm-hmm.
And what he was doing is he was getting us to learn how to critically think, to use to rationalize, to say, okay, he's telling us, so it must be true. No. What if I'm telling you a lie today? You don't know if it's true. I want you to find out if it's true or not. So um, I think we need to, like you were talking about, uh, more education in this. Um, because one thing I think that is dangerous that humans do, especially with tribalism, is indoctrination versus teaching. Indoctrination can lead to a lot of bad things that we've seen throughout our history as humans. And um, indoctrination is really not learning things. It's just being told a certain view and that's it.
Yes, can you clarify a little bit more what you mean by indoctrination versus teaching?
Okay, so indoctrination is uh, where, if it's a government or a religious group or so forth, says, okay, we got it all figured out. This is it. And this is what you need to know without question. No questioning. This is it. And we don't have to have proofs to show this is correct. It just is. And where teaching is, okay, 2 plus 2 equals 4, and this is why. You have to prove it. Then you also teach the proof for the mathematical equation, for example. And so, um, uh, and then also too, there's the ability to question that. And so with teaching, there's a teaching about things that we have uh, figured out as humans and have proved it to be true, and then also then to teach um, other humans about these things and how to prove it. Um, for example, like when my son was going through his master's um, program and he was taking high level calculus, they had to just not only did they have to make the equation and figure out the formula, but then they would have to spend days proving that this was the correct answer. And that was more important than just finding the answer. They had to prove it. And where with indoctrination, you don't have to prove nothing. This is just how it is, and you have to just take it for granted. And to me, that's the big difference.
Mhm. Yeah, I think there is a problem there. I'm in agreement with you. Uh, but there is a problem in that there's the question as to uh, how one uh, can arrive at the conclusion that, yes, this is true. Because the really big thing that's happening these days are major conspiracy theories.
Hmm.
And uh, so the question, uh, it seems to me, is um, well, what most people do is they say, well, that's a conspiracy theory because it's different from what I believe. But people can be mistaken.
Hmm.
And so the the question arises as to what should people do when there is difference of opinion. And you were saying that the first thing is to avoid making difference of opinion a reason for relationship breakdown, either abandonment of the relationship or hostility or something like that. Um, that we need to develop the ethical principle that we should be friendly and respectful to uh, others, whatever their particular belief system is. But um, but just saying that, well, we just have to live together is not a complete answer, I don't think, because I would maintain one of my strongly held principles is that accuracy of belief is extremely important to us humans. Now, uh, there are problems with that principle, though, because there are many examples of beliefs that are indeed considered to be inaccurate by people knowledgeable in a particular area, and yet provide great comfort and an improved life for some people. Religious ideas, for instance. And So that would imply, well, people should uh, be allowed uh, to believe whatever made their life better. The problem with that is that sometimes that leads to pretty bad stuff. Other times it does not. So it's a more complicated issue. But at any rate, just live and let live, and never trying to come to agreement, I think, is not the optimal way. And um, so how should conspiracy theories be addressed? And I think that there's should be something that does not yet exist for us humans, and that is a worldwide, essentially, organization, the function of which is to assess uh, different conflicting viewpoints where it's all in the open. And so the individuals on different sides of these issues would present their reasoning and the data that they're using and so forth. And then that would be um, viewable by other people who might say, well, yeah, but there are problems in how you're interpreting the data or something like that. And that it would be a process of uh, continual working on any difference of opinion. And so it would have a whole uh, a large amount of content, like there would be continuous discussions going on in many, many different areas, but that those discussions were always available to anybody who wanted to check out a particular issue. So I kind of think that that's a good thing.
No, that would be good, but mankind, we would have to really become a very ethical species to do that because
Mhm.
as you know, we've seen with like different organizations and agencies in the world and in our own country that when these things are put in place to do things like that, the first thing that with people that are politicians or very wealthy people will try to influence those organizations to get them to uh, make decisions based upon what they want. And a lot of these officials, a lot of times, these organizations then take the bribes and then don't objectively look at things. Instead, they they do whatever whoever's giving them the money wants them to do.
Mhm.
So I agree that would be a good thing, but I think we're not humans. We're still easily bribed and influenced, so we wouldn't be able to do that correctly.
Well,
Unfortunately.
right, right. Currently, it does not exist. Uh, this would be something that would have to be developed,
Mm.
and there would have to be a greater valuing of transparency. What we currently do for like conspiracy theories is try to shut down their communication so that they're not allowed to express their views to people. And there's reason for that because some of the conspiracy theories lead to very unfortunate behavior. Um,
Hmm.
but it should be possible for people that really believe uh, in a set of ideas like this for that for the individual to have open debate with other people in a transparent way.
Right,
And
and bring out evidence
uh
and
yes,
validate it by the evidence. and say that if there's no evidence for this,
Uh-huh.
then we can't say that this idea, this conspiracy or whatever is actually true,
Yeah.
because there's
Uh-huh.
no evidence to support it. We have to have evidence. I think like in statistics, mathematical statistics, it's like facts can disprove a theory but can't prove it, and that is because we may not have the full knowledge yet, but the facts can disprove a theory. And so the same thing with validation and evidence, that needs to be discussed. So, for example, you could have, let's say, like with the recent election, the Trump administration said that there was all kinds of voter fraud going on, and they were, making it sound like millions and millions of votes were discounted counted the wrong way, etc. Well, okay, that's a strong accusation, but you're gonna have to prove that. So you can't just say that without proof. And they never really attempted to prove it, but that's a whole other story. But so so um, if you had proof, then you could say it. But if you don't have proof yet, you could say, well, this is just an idea or a theory, but it's not we don't know yet because we don't have proof yet. Well, then the onus is on that person saying that they have to get proof to validate it. Um, and so yeah, uh, that is a problem, but it has to be validated.
Yeah. Now, there is um, a little bit of a problem with the use of the term proof because uh, the term is most appropriate in the field of logic, like especially mathematics and so forth, where one makes the assumption, axiomatically perhaps, that certain propositions are true in quotes, and then when uh, logical rules are followed, it can be shown that others, it can be proven that such and such a idea follows. But that doesn't mean that uh, even though that is proven, it doesn't mean that it's correct as far as the description of the world is concerned.
Mm-hmm.
So our world is not one of Euclidean geometry, for instance. Um, so what the rules of evidence do uh, is to um, increase or decrease the probability of something being so. You've used another term also that is a little problematic, and that is fact. So one could perhaps define the word um, so as to make it uh, refer just to a limited number of propositions. But people readily say, well, it's going to rain tomorrow, and that's a fact. And so we are very loose in our terminology. And fact usually refers to what I believe, um, but
Or it could,
not
or it
always.
could be it could be factual. When I think of facts, I think of facts uh, based upon uh, the evidential experience of humans that have been proven. So, for example, we know it's a fact if you stick your hand in a fire, it's going to hurt. Okay, it's going to destroy your skin and your all the components of your hand. It's going to do damage, terrible damage to it. And that's because of the properties of fire and what it does to the human flesh, etc. So we've proven that. So that would be a fact. Now, this is so what I was saying before was that so a fact like that can disprove a theory, but it cannot prove a theory. And the reason why is because something you said earlier was that as far as discovering everything in the universe and in our earth, etc., humans, we've barely tapped into it. So we have theories as of right now that stand based upon the facts that we know, or based upon the things that we know that work or don't work. But those theories aren't the end of it. There could be more that we just haven't discovered yet that we can add on to that or correct that. So for example, you take Isaac Newton's his uh, discovery of gravity and all his mathematical equations and how the gravitational poles work in two different directions and so forth to keep the orbits and so forth. So it's been proven to be correct, and he proved it through math, and then we've proved it through science, actually doing it with our astronauts and so forth. But that doesn't mean that's the end. That's the maximum of that knowledge. There could be more as more scientists and more researchers take that previous knowledge and they can continue to build. We may discover more things based upon that and know more about it. So um, we do have certain facts that have been experimental that we know that can disprove a theory. So let's say someone tells me, well, if I put my hand on a fire, it won't burn. I can say, well, we've done experiments as humans and we have validation that no, you put your hand on a fire, it's going to burn. So that disproves their theory. Um, uh, so, um, so I would use facts more in that sense.
Well, so fact means unusually strongly believed.
Mm, no, I would say experimentally proven.
But remember, I was saying that our experiments don't prove or disprove. What they do is increase or decrease the probability of the correctness of propositions. Proof is something in the area of logic, but not in the area of evidence and uh, the area of understanding our world. Um, so um, I understand that like the example that you used would be that most anyone would have an extremely strong belief in. Um, and that might be because of various things. I think there are some people who walk on hot coals and things of that sort, and there are beliefs in levitation and so on. So if it's understandable, I think that you and I would believe that walking on coals, hot coals, is going to be harmful if the foot stays in contact long enough, and so on, uh, and so forth, and that levitation is not possible. However, you and I don't know everything in the world, and so if levitation can be demonstrated, or anything can be demonstrated, then that would be reason to do a lot of reconsidering and reevaluating. Um, so, uh, again, that has to do with the probability of the proposition being correct or incorrect. Um, but um, what people, when people use the word fact, um, they use it in uh, in many ways that are not uh, that in many ways that do not refer to things that there's universal agreement about. So there are some ambiguities in our language, and and that's something that I think we humans are still, um, in our childhood. I have considered that ethically, we humans are still just a toddler uh, with a long, long way to go if we're using as a way of looking at that how we might become in the future if we work hard at it and are lucky and so forth, don't get hit by an asteroid, and so on.
I have to think about that because I do believe there are facts that have been proven, but um, I do understand what you're talking about with certain things. There's probabilities. Um, I have to think about that a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then see when it comes to beliefs, um, so for example, let's take a Catholic who believes that the Bible is actually God's word revealed to man. So there's no error in it. It's divine, and that the Pope in Rome is Jesus on earth, and so he's perfect, and that all the church writings and all their councils and everything they write about is perfect. It cannot err. Okay? So it's infallible. Um, but but if I look at it, I see there are contradictions, there are errors, and that these are just man-made, made-up things. Um, so, but they would be in their minds, they would say that this is truth. This is 100% true, and but we have real validated proof against those things that they are not. There's no proof that it is from a God, but just merely men wrote these things down. So I guess my question is then, well then, so beliefs can be wrong. I think we'd agree on that then. So beliefs can be wrong. It could be mistaught. Um, so a right belief system is important in order to have the right rationality. What do you think about that?
A right belief system
Yes.
is important for rationality?
Yes.
No. I would say that um, rationality uh, increases the likelihood of accurate beliefs. Um, that's the way I would say that.
Right. Because if you had a belief system in order to get rationality, then that would mean you would take an a priori idea and then you would attempt to make it real. And so I believe a lot of the problems we have today um, in the world and even in the United States is that we have a lot of belief systems that are uh, what I call a priori out there ahead of what I would consider reality, and then try to make that reality without being proven, and then saying that's our rationality. And I think that's a lot of the problems with why humans have certain beliefs about certain things or hold to certain things they believe are true so strongly. It's because they had an idea ahead of time that hasn't been proven and hasn't been matched to reality, and then they therefore say it is true without any kind of validation to it.
Yeah, well, I think that now again, you're using the word proof in an area that I would not use the word. I would use increasing or decreasing the probability of something. Um, I understand what you're talking about, and am in agreement with you about that there are all sorts of things like that. Um, as I was saying closer to the beginning, um, there is the possible idea that even if it's not accurate, it may be beneficial to have it. Um, and that raises some interesting ethical issues. But leaving that aside, I believe that the more accurate our beliefs are, the more, um, the better the quality of our life. Less pain, suffering, disability, and early death, and more joy, contentment, and appreciation. So, I think there was one other thing that I thought about responding to, but it's not coming to mind. Um, so we still, to a significant extent, have different languages, but I think we're beginning to understand each other's language a little better. Um,
Right. And I think also too, I think the where we start with man is different starting points.
mhm.
So and I think that makes a difference too.
Yeah.
Um, so I think, that is different. I see that being different. But I do see where we start to come together though is despite where we start with man, we do see a lot of issues that we do deal with today
Mhm.
that in a recent history that has plagued man uh, by certain things, and so I think for me that is very important that we deal with man how he is today and try to improve that, um, but not disregarding um, ancient man or early man or things like that to understand where we come from. I think that's important too. But for me, I think it's more of trying to improve humans now to make us better in the near future and far future.
Yeah, well, I would say that I am in agreement with those goals, improving ourselves now and in the far future too. That's what humanity is all about. um, but I do think accurate beliefs about the nature, in quotes, of man uh, help to accomplish that. And uh, that's why I think it's valuable to take a look at uh, some a belief system like objectivism and see whether the foundations for it are consistent with an accurate understanding of uh, who we are as humans and what makes us tick and so on.
Yeah, so I think with objectivism, I think you'd have to say that it starts with um, more recent Homo sapien species as a starting point rather than more ancient Homo sapien species.
Well, I think, yeah, but I think also that there is a little, at least the what is conveyed by the statements that are made. It implies uh, that things that uh, are not so, as far as I can tell. The whole idea of, well, we are basically rational. Um, uh, it depends on what that would mean. Uh, if it meant, well, we have the capacity for becoming a little bit rational, uh, and we ought to keep working at it, sure. But if it's, oh no, there are some of us, especially us objectivists, who uh, are completely in the right about what we humans are like and how we function and so forth. Um, that would be a little different. And I think there is a somewhat of a difference in the ethical issues, uh, comparing objectivism and a belief system like mine, for instance. Um, it, well, that has to do, yeah, there's this whole big issue of free will versus determinism that is a part of the mind body problem. Um, that where I think that objectivism chooses um, to use the free will model um, so that superiority uh, can be achieved, can be assumed. Well, you should be an objectivist like me, because then you would um, be more ethical and so forth. And when you did what uh, you did it because you chose to be irrational, and therefore you should be punished or whatever. And that may not be uh, a set of statements that you or some particular objectivist would uh, offer, but I've heard things kind of along those lines. And that's an area that could be explored also. But that, I think, to really do that, we'd have to. You had started planning, if I remember correctly, to read a chapter a week on the of the Mind Body Problem book, which of course is free on the website. Um, but
Yeah, maybe I need to maybe get back to that. I've just been really busy with work and some other
yeah,
things that haven't had a chance to really to do that recently. But
yeah, I understand. Yeah,
no, but I understand. I understand what you're saying. But I think with philosophical systems, um, the philosophy itself and those who hold to it have tried to work things out to get rid of any errors that they see or inconsistencies or contradictions. Um, and so that's why we have a lot of different philosophies. There's existentialism, there's, you know,
yeah,
Marxism, so forth. There's just a lot of different, and they all claim to be the one that has it figured out and got rid of all the errors. Now, I think that um, the proof of those philosophies then have to be validated by human experience and to see how those actually worked out. Uh, for example, um, there's two philosophies that I really like that I've read a lot of and still reading is existentialism and stoicism. I think when it comes to a understanding of how humans work and the best way for humans to live amongst one another, I find those two philosophies incredibly, incredibly beneficial to humanity. Just because the things they teach matches from what I see in human experience, in my own experience, um, more so than I do Christianity and their teachings.
mhm.
So um, I think it's um, like you're talking about that okay, we still have to be careful and understand that if we hold to a certain philosophy, that it may not be 100% correct and it may not be the only best one because there are a lot of other good ones out there
Mhm,
and there's a lot of similarities with other philosophies
mhm.
um, that may teach things that are similar that people can glean a lot of good things from. And so, and that's where I like what you were doing on your website with the ability for people with different philosophies to almost like a collaboration to put their input in writing about what they believe. Because what if what if it really is that as humans in our known history that we've been striving to figure things out to come up with the optimal philosophy of life that will be beneficial for all humans. And so we make errors because we make mistakes, but we were striving towards it. And
Yeah,
so and
yeah,
so different philosophies have been created, examined, corrected, modified, etc., built upon each other. So that maybe one day we take the best out of all the different ones that humans have come up with in their discoveries and we make one that is truly correct and beneficial for humanity.
yeah. Well, of course, I don't expect that it will ever happen that everybody in the world believes exactly the same thing as far as the basic ethical philosophy. But on the other hand, I believe we have a long way to go, and that there are very important ideas and principles that we can have, that the more we live by them, the better it is for us and for each other.
Mhm.
So you're talking about the Humanian Belief Manual, I believe.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Have you by any chance registered in it and entered any of your beliefs?
Not yet, but I do need to do that. I think it'd be I think it'd be a good exercise and a uh, good collaboration,
Yes.
to yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So yeah, and for example, um, I believe let's say the New Testament of the Bible that the Christians hold to. Now, I'm not 100%. I don't know. I don't believe that it was written by God. I believe that humans created that. And so there are good things that they teach that I believe can help humanity. But then there are superstitious things that I believe that don't help humanity. So we can take out the things that don't match humanity, don't help, and we can keep the things that do. So I think we can do that with every philosophy. Um, and we can learn from that and apply those things and improve our species that way.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, I think so. Um, well, let's see. We've come quite a ways in this discussion. Um, so I think it will be good for us to continue. We've kind of been meeting on a weekly basis and see how that goes.
Yeah,
And something that came to my mind. Um, uh, I have in the past studied other philosophical ideas and so forth, but it's all of that is receded from memory to a great extent. And you're very knowledgeable, so it would be interesting maybe for you to present one of these belief systems that you were impressed by, and then for us to have our discussion about the language involved and the basic ideas and so on. Does that?
yeah. Though that's a great idea because one of the ones one philosophy that I'm extremely intrigued by is existentialism
Uh,
because existentialism also covers psychology along with philosophy and it tries to bring up remedies for humanity to cure psychological issues. And I find that extremely fascinating because there's a lot of philosophies that just have to do with a philosophy of life, but really don't get into the psychology of humans. But existentialism does. And so maybe we could talk about that because
yeah.
that has really fascinated me.
Mhm. Okay. Well, shall we call it an evening, and then we'll see how the next discussion goes.
All right. All right, Bill. Take it
Hope
easy.
I
I'll
hope
see
to
you.
see you in the belief manual.
Yeah. Okay.
Take care. Bye
Take
bye.
care. Bye.
Humanity.